Hi there, welcome to another edition of Yoga with Ann. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we're going to be focusing on the neck and more specifically text neck. So just notice how you're sitting right now. So sit comfortably. Maybe you're already seated. I'm going to switch to the profile just so you can see. So I'm just going to show you how I normally sit. This is how I normally sit. Feels really good. My pelvis is tucked under, my shoulders are coming forward, my neck is, my chin is jutting forward, and my neck's kind of hollowed out and back. And it feels really good, but it's not good for the body, right? And when I teach yoga, I try not to say good or bad, right or wrong, but this isn't healthy for my body. So I have to remind myself about sitting tall. I'm sitting on a block right now in what's called hero pose, virasana. It's not a pose for everybody. So if sitting cross-legged is better or in a chair or whatnot, then please do that. But just notice how you're sitting. So we can make simple adjustments to sit in better alignment in a healthier way for our bodies. So that's why sitting on something is really important. So today, the props that you will need, so if you have yoga props, awesome. Use them, have them, but not everyone has yoga props, right? So a blanket will work, and if you don't have a blanket that folds and rolls easily, then have a beach towel or a bath towel. Those are the best alternatives to a yoga blanket. You might have blankets in your house that are big and fluffy and all that, but they're not going to work for what we need them for. So you can be sitting, if you happen to have a yoga block, you could be sitting on a yoga block, or you could be sitting on a blanket or something, firm that's going to allow you to be able to sit tall. You could also be sitting in a chair. So the block actually helps me to tilt my pelvis slightly forward. So that's why for most of us, we need to sit on something. And then so the pelvis is slightly forward. I could still hunch, right? But it's like, it's starting to remind my body how I need to sit. And then I check in that my shoulders are right above my hips. And then I check in with my head, my neck, and my chin. So it's really easy to jut your chin forward or to drop it. So this is what happens with text neck, right? When we're looking at our phones, our computers, whatnot. So we start with our chin parallel to the floor. And then the deep in your neck, in your throat, think about moving back. So sometimes when I say that, someone will lift their head. So think that like your head and neck can move back just slightly. And then, you can have your arms in your lap or down by your sides. If we were standing, we'd have our arms down by our sides. So you have to remind yourself, and I'm constantly like working and I realize I'm like hunched like this, and I realize why my typing teachers wanted me to type not looking at the keyboard, because I realize when I look at my keyboard, then this is happening. So we make these adjustments. I've been teaching text neck a lot lately in my Zoom yoga classes, the yoga classes that I teach at work. And it's something that we've been focusing on regularly. So even if my theme isn't the neck or text neck, we're reminding ourselves to check in. So these habits have been happening for however long you've been on this earth, and they'll continue until you make those tiny little changes. So notice when you're driving, I adjust my mirror so that if I'm slouched, I can't see in my mirror properly. So then I need to sit tall and long. So these are small habits that we can make. Habits that we can change. We already have these habits, right? So small changes that we can make. So our head, in the research I've done, can weigh anywhere between 8 and 12 pounds. So when we let it hang, it puts more pounds of pressure on our neck. So the deeper and longer that we hold, the more pounds of pressure on our neck, our back, our shoulders, our low back, and it affects everything in our body. So be mindful that when you notice you're doing that, sit tall, maybe do a couple of shoulder rolls, and you make those minor adjustments, right? So we're gonna focus on that today with the practice that we will do. So if you haven't yet made an adjustment, come to a comfortable seat, sitting on something. You might need to remake those adjustments, even sometimes just doing a shoulder roll, because we also don't realize that we walk around. So we walk around with our chin forward and our shoulders up by our ears, right? And that's because we hold a lot of stress up here. So how can we release that? And it might just be a shoulder roll or two, a couple of inhales and exhales, like just focused. So focused breathing, all it has to be is noticing your breath. We're going to transition onto our mats, lying down. So if you have something that will work as a blanket, it'll probably be useful right now. Of note, so when I lie down on the mat, for most poses, there's a few poses where we don't use anything under our heads, but for most poses where I'm lying down, I have support under my head. Because when I lie down, you know, because remember this stuff happens. So if we lie down, you know, like the back of our head, you know, we're not going to be lying down comfortably. But we also have to make sure that the support we have on our head isn't pushing our head so far forward that we're now in this position. And I'm not sure if you can notice in the recording, but I notice that my voice changes when my chin is moving forward. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you have a yoga block, have your yoga block up at the top of your mat. If you don't have one, no big deal. Maybe there's a piece of furniture there where you can always also use your own body. So we're going to come to lie down in constructive rest with our knees bent and our feet on our mat. And as we practice today, I'm very mindful of alignment and form and what might work for one person may not for another, but honor your body. So if you choose not to do something for whatever reason, it doesn't feel safe, you're not sure if you can do it, you don't want to do it, honor that, right? Honoring your physical body, but also your heart, your breath, and your mind. So let's come into constructive rest. So our feet are basically hip distance apart. And I've got my support under my head. So notice if maybe you have too much support under your head, so your chin's kind of tucking under. So here, my neck is pretty long on all four sides. Pretty even here. That's not with all yoga poses, right? Sometimes we shorten the back of the neck or the front of the throat or vice versa. But here we want to be pretty neutral with our neck. So the base of your skull should be either on your yoga mat or your support. And if you're using a yoga block, or that's all that you have, you could have it under your head as well. It'll put your head a little higher, but that should be okay, but check in with that. All right, and then we're gonna step our feet as wide as our mat. So if you do need to make an adjustment with your support under your head, please do that. And we're gonna do some windshield wipering. So the next time you exhale, and you can have your hands wherever's comfortable, on your belly, on your chest, out to the side. The next time you exhale, allow your knees to move to one side. When you inhale, you're going to bring them up. And when you exhale, to the other side. Inhale up. All right, so this next round, if it feels okay for you, when your knees go to the right, you're going to turn your chin to look over the left. So the next time you exhale, allow your knees to the right and your chin to the left. So you're twisting, and then inhale up, and exhale, knees to the left, and you'll look over the right. So if that's not okay, inhale up, then keep your head neutral, and go back and forth to your own breath. Let's do 2 more rounds. You also decide how far your knees go. Final round. Everyone's breath is different, so don't worry if you're faster or slower. Once you're complete, you come back upright, step your feet back together, head and neck neutral. All right, we're gonna roll over to one side. So allow your knees to go to the side that works best for you. Roll on over. We're going to bring our head up last. So see if you can press your arms and hands into the floor. Allow your head to hang. And come on up. So a lot of times we kind of jerk ourselves up, so we got to be mindful. This can even be like how you get up in the morning, come up and out of bed. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to come onto all fours in a tabletop. Your padding can be useful for knees if you have sensitive knees. Depends on what kind of flooring you're on, right? And then I've got my block up here at the top of my mat. You may or may not use your block for a variety of reasons. And again, if you don't have one, then you just will use, I have a wall right here, maybe you have a piece of furniture. I have this little table, I would not put any weight on it, but, and we're gonna come onto all fours. So we're gonna start with our wrists below our shoulders and our knees below our hips. And then check in, like for me, sometimes it's a little much in this wrist, so you could put your hands a little more forward. Maybe you turn your fingertips in slightly, maybe out slightly. So find the best spot for you. See if you can have neutral head and neck here. So that might be difficult to find, right? So we just do our best. So here's my head dropping. Here's my head holding up. And then I'm going to try to find what seems fairly neutral. So like my gaze is in between my hands. And I can imagine that I'm reaching out from the crown of my head, and then I'm reaching out from my imaginary tail. And then the next time I exhale, I'm going to round, starting with my tail, tucking my tail under, rounding my spine, chest kind of concaves, and head and neck drop slightly. And then we're going to do the opposite. Inhale, lift your tail up, back arches, heart opens, head and neck slightly. So don't like flip your head and neck up. And we'll go back and forth again to our breath. And just notice if your head and neck are trying to lead. See if they can be followers. We do a lot of leading with our head, our chin, our neck in what we do every day and in our yoga practice. One more round. We'll come back to neutral, what feels like neutral for you. And then we're going to come into downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. So this is not okay for everybody. So you're welcome to stay in your tabletop and do a little more cat-cow. If you know child's pose, you could come into child's pose. You could also come into puppy pose where your hands come slightly forward and your hips move back. And maybe you do a little more. And you notice, like, are you holding your head up? Are you dropping it? So I'm going to set up for down dog. I'm going to step my hands one handprint forward, curl my toes under, lift my knees up, and shift my hips back. So my knees are deeply bent right now. This is a lot, so if you need to come down, come down. But it's really easy to do weird things with your head and neck here. So I see a lot of students looking at their hands. So I'm looking at my hands right now, my head is pretty high up. And then other times we're looking at our knees, and that's dropping too much. So we gotta find an in-between. For me, I find it's kind of looking at my feet. If I look at the middle of my mat, which I used to think that was a good space, I'm holding my head up. So you want your neck to be neutral. Remember, long on all four sides. Come down if you need to. And then we're going to transition into Uttanasana, standing forward fold. I'm going to move my blanket out of the way. You could walk over it, just be mindful. And I'm going to step forward. If that doesn't work for you, you can walk your hands back. So wherever you are, I want us to be near our block if we have a block. So I'm just going to walk a little bit forward. And I'm going to use my block. So feet are about hip distance apart. And we're going to come into a forward fold. So flexion here. So again, noticing, like, are we leading in that fold with our head and neck? And then we're going to come into a half fold. So you could use your block. You could have your hands at your hips, hands on piece of furniture or the wall. So we're going to come halfway, bringing your body into the shape of an L. Knees can be bent or straight. Reaching through the crown of your head, out through your tail, neck long on all four sides. We're going to come back into that forward fold. See if your chin can stay neutral. So that might mean that we do a slight tuck of our chin, and then we come back into our forward fold. And then let's come back into that half fold, Ardha Uttanasana. Nice. If your hands are not already at your hips, bring your hands to your hips, and we're going to bend our knees like we're going to sit back in a chair. So make sure this isn't happening. And then hands can stay at hips, at heart. I usually have my arms out in front of my shoulders. You could have them up by your ears. That's a little much for me. And then we're going to bring our hands back to our hips, and we're going to allow our legs to straighten, coming into Tadasana. So I know my head's getting cut off here right now. I'm going to come down in a moment, but I want us to focus on our feet first. So feet about hip distance apart. We feel around for the bony protrusions in our hips, and if we could draw a line down our legs, the line would go right through the middle of our ankles. That's hip distance apart. That doesn't work for everybody. So find where you feel grounded and rooted in your feet. So that might be farther apart. That might be closer together. So find that place. And then see if you can stand tall. Pick your toes up, spread them nice and wide, set them back down. I'm going to come on down. You stay standing. I'm coming on down so that you can see the upper part of my body. So we want to stand tall. Let's do a shoulder roll. And then notice head and neck. So maybe chin's jutting forward, maybe you're dropping your chin. So we'll come to what we feel is neutral with our chin parallel to the floor, then a slight tuck. And then we're going to move back from deep in our neck and throat. Might feel a little weird, right? All right, so we're going to do a neck stretch here. So let's bring our right ear to our right shoulder. Your arms can stay down by your sides or maybe like hands at hips better. So we're stretching the opposite side of the neck and breathing. And then we'll come back upright. And let's bring left ear to left shoulder. And notice if you're bringing your shoulder up, and maybe you need to do a shoulder roll to remind yourself to relax. And we'll come back upright. So if that felt like plenty for you, you can repeat that. If you want to do a little more, we're going to add to the stretch. So at any time you can back off, you can come back to the next step. So let's bring our right ear to our right shoulder. If you feel like a little more would be okay, you're going to extend your left arm out, shoulder height, palm facing down. Maybe you feel like I could add a little more. So you're going to take your right arm and you're going to drape it over your head. So you're not going to press on your head. You're just going to add a little weight. And breathe. Let's remove the arm from our head. Other arm comes down. We'll do a little bobblehead here. Let's do a shoulder roll. And how about another? So notice if you've changed where your neck, your head, your chin are in space and make that adjustment. And then let's go to the second side. Left ear to left shoulder. Check in, this might be plenty. Like this side, it's a lot more intense for me. Check in with your breath. If you want to do a little more, we're going to extend that right arm out to the side, palm facing down. Maybe a little more. Other arm comes out over on top. Puts a little weight on your head. Remove the arm from your head. Other arm comes down. Little bobblehead. Let's do some shoulder rolls again. All right, nice. Come back to your Tadasana, your mountain pose with your feet planted and even, noticing where your shoulders are, head and neck, so making any of those adjustments. And then you're going to come back down onto your mat. So we are going to do one of my favorite poses, which is the heart opener. We're going to do it over a roll today, so you don't need any extra props except a blanket or a towel. So I know everybody's items are going to be different. Actually, this is one opening bigger than I'd like. So I'm going to open my blanket up here. So this is why I like having something that rolls easily is great. So beach towel, bath towel totally works. So I'm going to open to this opening, and then I'm going to set it down on my mat, and I'm going to make a roll, and I'm going to roll from the long edge. You could roll from the short edge. That's going to make the roll thicker, and it might be too much. So some of you are only going to need to roll, my blanket's all uneven, only need to roll halfway. If you do that, you have a little padding under your head. I think that's what I'm going to do today. You could go bigger, and once you come into the heart opener, you might find that it's not enough or it's too much, and so you come out and you make that adjustment. So we want to support the lower tips of our shoulder blades. So think about like right out from your armpits. If you know where a bra strap goes, you can use that as an indicator. When we come down onto the roll, our arms should easily come above the roll. They don't have to stay there, but that's how you kind of know you're probably in the right spot. You can, of course, be too low and you can be too high. So I'm going to come down in constructive rest. So it can be a little intense, right? Because in our lives, we do everything forward, arms forward, head forward, and this is bringing us into a back bend, extension, and most of our life we're in flexion, especially with our sitting culture. So here I've got the lower tips of my shoulder blades on the block, or excuse me, on the roll. I can tell my arms will easily come above the roll, and then I'm bring my hands behind my head, like I'm gonna do a crunch. I've got my knees bent, feet on the mat. And then I'm gonna rest the base of my skull in my hands. And then I'm gonna imagine that I can bring some traction into my neck. So I'm gonna reach the crown of my head to whatever is behind me. And then I'm gonna slowly lower down. You can release your hands and check in. That might be too much, and maybe you make a little adjustment. I have a wall in the way here for my arms, so I have to make an adjustment for that. So if you have something in the way, you can adjust for you. You could also have your hands, on your chest or the prop or whatnot. If it doesn't quite feel right, adjust slightly, like 1/4 of an inch can make a huge difference. It can be intense because your body's not used to being in this position. It can be intense physically, but also emotionally because your heart is open and vulnerable. So you could also place your hands on your heart or place a pillow or another blanket across your heart to add a little weight. If you absolutely can't do this pose, especially for emotional reasons, but really for any reason, you can come out and just come into constructive rest or come into a seat. We're going to hold this for a little bit. Bring your attention back to your breath. Perhaps you've taken a fuller, deeper inhale and you notice the effects being in this pose in your breath, in your physical body. And allow that exhale to fully release. We're going to make our way over to one side. This is the best way to get up. I don't recommend sitting straight up because we've just done all of these nice things to our physical body, to our breath, to our brain, to our nervous system. So we want to keep that as long as we can. So if your legs are extended out long, bend your knees and let's roll over to one side. And again, we're going to try to bring our head up last. So allow it to hang as you press your hands and arms. And come up into a seated position. So that heart opener, once I stopped talking, we were probably in it about 2 minutes. I've been trying to do it in the evening before I go to bed. It can be a great pose to do to start your day, the middle of your day, the end of your day. And you don't need any fancy yoga props to do that. So I highly recommend it. It gives you kind of whatever you need. If you need to calm down, if you need to quiet for the night, if you need to be energized, if you need to focus on your breath. It does so many amazing things, and it reminds us about these habits that we have to open to open, to lengthen, to breathe, all of those things. So I highly recommend this pose as a regular part of your daily living. I love it so much. So yeah, so we're gonna end class. If you wanna come to lie down in constructive rest with your knees bent and your feet on your mat, I'm gonna stay seated because I feel pretty relaxed from that heart opener. But you're welcome to do, a variation of Shavasana, which is our final pose of relaxation. But as I teach, I give my students permission to be seated, to lie down, to do what's best for them. It's just a few moments here. We won't be here very long. To be quiet, to be still, to be calm. So if it's best for you to lie down to do that, then you do that. If you prefer to be seated, just make sure you're comfortable. So if you're seated and you're sitting cross-legged, kind of notice that. You probably brought your habitual leg forward. See if you can have the other leg forward. If it absolutely doesn't work, it's painful, of course, make an adjustment. It might feel a little weird, and that's okay. So we're just going to be here for a few moments. I'm going to close my eyes. You can soften your gaze, close your eyes, or keep them open. And let's do so if you're lying down, this won't work, but you could lift your shoulders to your ears. So if you're seated, let's do a shoulder roll. If you're lying down, just bring your shoulders up to your ears and then bring them back down. So if you're lying down, you probably have a good neutral place for your head, your neck, your chin. Make sure that your support under your head isn't too high or too low. And then if we're seated, bring your chin parallel to the floor, a slight tuck, and then a slight move back from the middle of your neck and throat. Bring your attention back to your breath. If you're lying down and you want to stay there, feel free to stay. If you're ready to move on, roll over to one side, press your hands and arms into the floor, bringing your head up last. And you'll find a comfortable seat, sitting tall, checking in with the placement of how your pelvis sits, where your shoulders are, your head, your neck, your chin. Making any adjustments, no judgment. We'll bring our hands together at heart center in Anjali Mudra as we seal our practice together. Keep peace in your mind, keep strength in your body, and keep love in your heart. From my heart to yours, I bow to you. Thank you so much for practicing with me today. I hope you have a lovely day. I appreciate you taking care of yourself and supporting me here. If you'd like to get a hold of me for anything, all of my information will be below, social media, my email. If you have any requests or comments or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for practicing with me, and I hope to practice with you again soon.